Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm here with Jos de Blok. Jos, you've been on my bucket list for years to get on the show. I'm thrilled that we're now able to make it. I've heard the Buurtzorg story, which we'll get into in many different books and variations. It's always inspired me. So now to have with me the man who was there at the birth of that organization is a great thrill. So Jos, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Richard.
So for our listeners who've not heard of you or Buurtzorg, let's can we sort of take them back to, I believe it's 2007, right? When the organization got its start. What is it? How did it get its birth into this world?
Oh, the birth was already in 2006. I've been I have a long career in healthcare. So at the moment, it's almost 40 years. But 15 years ago, I wanted to combine all my experiences in a kind of a design, a model. From which I thought this is much more sustainable than the existing models we have. So I've been a community nurse for many years. I've been a director in a home care organization. And I have my own views on how should we deal with hierarchy or not. How can we support professionals in a good way? And how can we create conditions that are really helpful for professional healthcare workers in their daily work? So based on all these ideas and experiences, I designed a Buurtzorg, a community care model, together with some friends. So we took 1.5 years, I think, in total, from 2004 to 2006. In 2006, I designed in a kind of a plan everything I thought was needed at that moment. And my idea was, if we start small with one team, and I start to work myself again as a nurse, we can show what it is, so that it's not only theory, but it's also practical. And even before that, I tried to sell it to some other organizations. So there were, I think, 5 or 6 organizations. And then my idea was to make it a kind of franchise model. And after some disappointing experiences with organizations, I tried to implement it. I started for myself. So I said, okay, I think the best possible way to show it is to start from scratch and to build it up myself with all the ideas I have. So that was at the end of 2006. So then we had one team. We had a turnover in 2006 of €400. And then in 2007, we said, okay, if we can make this work in different places and we can show what it is, groups of nurses working autonomous in self-organized teams in neighborhoods, then my expectation was that everyone would like to want it. So would want this because it's good for the nurses, it's good for the patients, and it will lead to less cost for the system. So that was my assumption. So this year of 2007, the beginning was quite difficult because it's like every small company when you start, I think it's trying to, you need to cover the costs. You have to find people who want to support you. Of course, you have to have the nurses, but it was quite easy. And we didn't want to be depending on investors. So I wanted to be a foundation, a not-for-profit foundation, because that was, I think, the best fit for the professional ethics of nurses. So they don't like that the idea is used in a commercial way. So they want to follow their professional ethics and want to do what's needed for the patient. So So we said, okay, that's in Holland. It will be a foundation. We need to arrange everything around us with health insurance, care offices, municipalities, and so on. So bit by bit, in 2007, we developed this network, what was needed, and we even got a lot of support, but was a bit unexpected. So one of the things which really helped was already in the summer of 2007. I got a visit from the Minister of Health. And there was a lady, Jet Bussemaker. She had heard about it because we were on television when we was just very small. We had 4 teams, I think. And we were on television, and she said, I read something about it. Can I visit you for a day? So I said, of course, you're very welcome. You can join on your bicycle with one of the nurses, visit the patients, and then you can see. And then we can organize a round table meeting where you can ask all the questions you want from the nurses, because it's not about me, it is about what the nurses are doing and the impact it has on the patient's life and on the nurse's life. So she did. And then from that day, she said, I will support this. So she wrote it in her blog. So that was a very important psychological moment that we feel supported by the leading politician in this area. So this was what happened in the first years. And then, okay, we were, I think, quite happy with what happened because we were break even in the first year. So at the end of the first year, we already had 12 teams, I think, all over the country. We had a turnover of 1 million. And we said, okay, if this works in 12 different places in the country, it will probably work everywhere. So this was the beginning.
So you got off to a flying start, really.
Yeah, more or less. So I already said about this support from the minister was very, but there was also a program in healthcare at that moment, which also started in 2007, which was called the transition program. So, and there was a big need and search for new ways of doing things, because a lot of people felt that we got stuck in the system. So a lot of people were disappointed, were not happy with how the system worked up till then. So from the nursing side, so a lot of nurses quit their jobs, but also from the patient side, there were a lot of frustrations about the complexity of the system. So if you needed help, you had to go to a certain office who was deciding on what your rights were. So how many hours, what kind of products you got. Then you had to go to a home care organization. Then somebody was doing the assessment, and the other one was doing the activities. And also the activities were split in several persons. So the complex activities by the nurse and the less complex activities by a personal carer or something, or a nurse assistant. So many people had a part in this delivering of healthcare. And I said, no, you should create continuity in person. So you should, from the nurse side, it's important that you understand what patients are going through, or where patients are going through, what their history is, and how you can lead them through to a phase which is very vulnerable, very difficult sometimes. So there you need continuity in person. So we said we are going to integrate all these activities. So from a holistic perspective, and these nurses are doing and the complex things and also the more simple things, because you need the simple things to understand what's really needed to do. So you can look at it from the activity side, and say, to wash somebody, what kind of skills do you need? But to understand the possibilities in mobility, therefore you need to work with people to see and understand what is possible. So based on the clear philosophy on self-support and prevention, we said, okay, this is what we're going to build. We're going to show what results are. and we're going to try to give everybody who wants this, we are going to hire, and we're going to give them a contract, and we will see how it will develop. So that was from the start our assumption. It would grow fast, and we would be able to scale it because of the autonomous teams. And we were already planning to create software which supports it.
Right. And you've alluded to it a little bit there, but just draw out some of the distinctions. So in terms of what's different, so you've already explained that nurses are now doing a much wider range of activities. We've not got this delineation of roles. They're organized into teams. You took autonomous teams. What are some of the other important differences between that they work and the way that you'd experienced nursing prior to?
We wanted to move from a product and activity-driven way of working to a more outcome way of doing things. So we said, what's important for patients is that you do the right interventions at the right moment, in the right way. So we said, this is a very complex process because it's different with everybody. So it's what you see is that when you have a linear process where you focus on the activities, then the patients got lost. It was a big change in the system because the whole system was based on a linear process where the activities were decided on by a certain office, and where the activities were planned by somebody in the office. So I said, no, if you want to do it in a holistic way, focusing on outcome, then you have to have the autonomy to decide every moment what you should do. And you have to integrate all the activities. And my assumption was that if you focus on the outcome, then the results will improve because you are focusing more on the problems and then what kind of interventions go with it, and then how can you do it in a kind of circular way so that every time again you reflect on what you're doing and you make your decisions yourself in every. So in this process, which is much simpler, then you see that the relationship between the patient and the nurse becomes stronger. So you only have to deal with a few people, and they have a more the focus on the patient, and it's more how can I say it? It's driven by the needs of the patient. So it's not driven by the regulations, it's not driven by the financials, but it's driven by what is needed at this moment with this patient. So, and the systems around it were very they were very rigid at that moment we started. So you had to administer or do the registration on the minute. So right. Many minutes for this product, so many minutes for that product, and it's in many countries a problem. So I said, no, we only want to deliver one service, and that's helping people in their daily life, quality of life. So we said one service, and we call it Buurtzorg. So that comes in place of these 20 different products. And when you have one service, then you don't need to think about all these different activities because it's all integrated in one service. So it's simplifying the whole system. So you don't need to spend the time to register all the moments and products and time. You can focus on the patients, and you can, based on your skills and your background as a nurse, you can do what you think is needed. So it has a lot of advantages to do it this way. But of course, we had to discuss with the health insurance, with the inspection, with the ministry, what kind of changes are needed in the system to support this. So, and because of what I said of this Minister of Health, that she was so supportive, she was very open in trying to find ways to support us. And so we got very easily we got the space to experiment. So we got paid in another way. So they even made on a national level, they made a special code for us, Buurtzorg. There is in the whole system. And then it still took, I think, 5, 6, 7 years that they integrated it in the law so that it became the standard. So
Oh wow, yeah.
So that's so we had in time we had quite an influence on the changes in the system, because we proved from the start that the results were much better. So that satisfaction was very high. The nurse satisfaction was very high, and most important for the people who look at it from a financial side, the costs per client were significantly lower.
Yeah.
So, and it was what everybody's surprised, because they thought we built a very efficient system. So it can be efficient in its processes, but it's not effective.
Yeah.
So you should focus on effectiveness. So effective interventions instead of doing things as fast as possible within the way we did it before. So I think it was in some ways it was very efficient, but it was not effective at all.
So that's what's extraordinary here. And there was a similar story of a health organization in India on a previous podcast that had a similar result. So costs have gone down, staff satisfaction's gone up, and client satisfaction's gone up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's through trusting or simplifying the process. It sounds like the term that we often hear in lean circles is a North Star. So there's just a singular purpose or mission or whatever we might call it, a guiding principle about improving people's quality of life. And then the nurses are trusted to orient themselves however's in whatever way is needed in order to achieve that outcome.
Yes, and I think there were some practical things which I think that if what you're doing every day has a certain logic in it, that it creates ownership. So if you create this environment where people can follow the routines which are logic, and they can decide on almost everything themselves, then it will the self-organizational principles will develop all the time themselves. So the teams get throughout the years, every time they reach another level in the way they deal with problems, in the way they communicate with their environment, the way they deal with patients. So my idea was to create a kind of organic way of growing, so personal growth, but also the growth of the teams. So we had the idea from the start to say, okay, when teams become bigger than 10, then they should think about splitting up into teams and then keep on growing. So we had places where one team started for a village or a part of the city, and then they took 2 teams with 2 neighborhoods, then from 2 to 4, from 4 to 8. So it was kind of of growth, which looked a bit like just how plants and animals and people are growing in cells. So
and in terms of the way it's emerged, for you touched on self-development there, like or personal growth. In what ways have you grown through this process?
I think perhaps other people should say that, but what I learned was to trust on my own intuition. I think it's quite important. I think what you ask now, because I had in the beginning, I felt that I had to unlearn things. So I also did the MBA study. I was director for many years. I was champion in making plans. So on every topic, I was director innovations. I did 25 projects at the same time. So I had to stop making plans, for example. So I had to listen to the nurses. They were going to tell me what they needed, but also what they didn't need. So I remember that I had a group of nurses together, and I was standing in front of the how you call it, flip over, and I was
Flip chart.
trying to
Flip chart. Yeah.
flip chart, and I was trying to explain them the balanced scorecard, and there were some nurses who were looking at me, and they said, "Why should we do this?" I said, "Yeah, it's a way to find out what your goals for the coming year could be, and it gives a balance in different topics." And while I was doing this, I was thinking it's silly that I'm doing this. Nobody's asking for it.
Right.
So so that was the moment that I became aware that I had to stop with thinking this way and reflect on what we were doing at that moment. And it was a process in the first years that I feel, if I look back now, that I feel that now I'm following my intuition, what I see and my experience about what's happening. And when I started, I still had the idea that I had to do a lot of things to make it happen. So,
Right.
and now it's funny that if I look where it comes from, also the ideas is that I'm closer to the moment that I was around 17, 18 years old. So then I was with this open mind looking at the world, and I don't have this all these things on my back, which I learned in all these courses and studies and so on. So I had to go back to my finding myself again in a way that I could look in an open way to what's happening.
Yeah.
Oh, and now you can say it like you develop wisdom, or you call it something. But I think in a certain way, I had this intuition when I was on the secondary school and looking at the world. And sometimes it feels now, I'm now 60 plus, and it feels now that I'm closer to that period. And in between, I had to have this experience to understand the world, how it works. So it was useful to have done all these things. But and I integrated, I think, this 40 years, all these experiences in this design, and I learned myself what is the best way to deal with it. So to deal with it in Buurtzorg itself, but also to deal with it in the outside world. So, to give you an example, I'm involved in a lot of different activities in thinking about the future of health or other topics, education. And usually I don't prepare anything. So I listen and I try to see what's happening, and I try to reflect on what's happening. And then I try to contribute from what is there.
Yes.
And usually something comes out of it, which is Sometimes very useful, sometimes not. But that's interesting. Interesting question, Richard.
Right. It sounds like it sounds like you said two things. There's something about letting go, like letting go of the something like, is it compulsion to push or to
Yeah.
tell or to educate and let that be a pull? Is it something like that, like where people pull something from you?
Yes, I think what Shada Nandaram, she did a lot of research in Buurtzorg, and um, she described it as the needing principle.
Eating principle.
So she said what Buurtzorg is doing all the time is doing what's needed. So,
Right.
and if you put it in a context in another organization, a lot of people are doing things which are not needed. So if you say you have a mission or vision or whatever, all these things, and if we say, okay, we start with the patient perspective, and the patient's perspective is showing us what is needed, and everything around it, what we do, should be based on that. So, and it's giving a lot of space. It's also creating a lot of ideas, because everybody has a certain idea about how things can develop, and take their responsibility in what they see. So it creates many ideas if you look at it. But it's always useful. So working from out this needing principle, it's helping a lot to focus on what is important.
Right.
So and then she said, and the second principle is the rethinking principle, and that's a reflection on what you're doing, and try to think about, can you improve the things you're doing, or can you do some education, or can you handle what you see, or do you need some extra support for that? So these two principles are very, very important, and they create a kind of culture where everybody is helping each other in creating the best possible things for patients.
Right.
And it's always about that. So it's always about, okay, we have a lot of problems which happens a lot. Sometimes you have problems which are not so happening so often. And then let's find out what we need for new knowledge, new skills to deal with that. And it's very relaxing. That's how I feel it, in a certain way, that you don't, if you look at, let's analyze the market, for example. Let's make policy plans on this and on that. That's not needed anymore. You don't need all these things to let all these things which are needed for patients to let it happen. You can, of course, you can think about some topics like e-health in healthcare, and then you can say, okay, how do we get more experience or more knowledge about what e-health can do for patients? But then it's already integrated in the thinking and the work of the daily practice that the nurses are working in. And if you look at, if you put it in, like, I was director innovations in the organization I worked before, and then they expected me to create something on, for example, on e-health, which was very abstract and was not connected with the daily work of the nurses.
Yeah.
But they said, that's not necessary. It should be impressive. It should be look like a big project which people are willing to write about. So then you get the marketing and the PR become more important to what you really are doing. So I said part of it is fake. So it's somebody standing for my door. So a lot of these things, if you look at it from a marketing perspective, then marketing, in my opinion, is not always based on the true world, the real world.
Yeah.
So when I said what patients go through, that's real life. So that's what I learned as a nurse. What's really important is when you are in the last phase of your life, when you know you're going to die, what is important? And for nurses, it's so important to do what is needed in this phase. I always say you can only do it once. So if somebody has cancer and somebody knows that, okay, within 2 months I'm going to die, then okay, I have to support the family in the right way. I have to talk about certain topics because that will come. Patients will have pain, for example. So you can, in an early stage, you can start to think about, okay, what will we do when this is going to happen? How do you want your family be involved? Can I teach your children what they can do if this is going to happen and you don't want to be depending on us? All these questions, if you don't do it, this last phase of your life will be different than what it could be. So, and this is what a lot of people, I think you almost have to have been a nurse to understand this.
Yeah.
So if people want to make it practical and say, okay, we make a protocol on it and then it will work, but that's not true. Protocols can be very damaging for this process. So you have to need this trustful relationship with people. Then they're going to tell you, then they open up, then they will tell you and share you things which they don't share when it's just an activity. So you as a person are connecting you with this other person, and then something exists. And this need to happen every time again. So it's and the moment with every patient, the moment that it happens, that people open up, is different. People have their own coping strategies. People have their own ways of dealing with problems. All families are different. So of course you know what can happen, but the moment you're doing these things are different, and that's the what I say is the craftsmanship. That is what the tacit knowledge you developed in your life to deal with it. That creates this best way of doing things, not the protocols, not the evidence-based things, but
the balanced scorecards.
Not the balance scored, but the practical wisdom, the intuition, and your experience as a nurse and your education. So, but it was always inspired by Professor Nonaka. It is a Japanese professor who wrote a lot about tacit knowledge. So in our society, we try to make everything explicit. So we try to put it into protocols and regulations and so on. But most of the work of nurses, and it's also with teachers and doctors, is in the heads of people. So it's based on year after year doing these things and understanding these patterns. These patterns are so important. So you need the environment and you need the autonomy and the space to do these things based on your practical wisdom and intuition.
Right. Yeah. Which is what you said. I mean, you're ending on the word intuition, and you mentioned intuition in your own growth, right? And that's what you're trusting in others around you, right? You're trusting them to use their own intuition.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I know you've recently started to get involved with is politics. So I'm now interested to hear how you're taking some of what you've learned through your work as a leader and with Buurtzorg into the political realm.
Yeah. They even had an interview last a Saturday evening. There are elections next week in Holland, and I was preparing with some other people a new political party, but we didn't finish it, so we didn't. So we're the party is over, I can say. But what we did in the meantime was to write our ideas down, and a lot of other parties can use these ideas. So what you see is that there is a kind of transition going on in I think every field, every industry, but also in politics. How do we do politics? So my ideas from Buurtzorg, you can easily put them, for example, on the education system. So if you say, if you look at our current education system, the space that teachers have to connect with students is too small, too little. So it's not enough. So they are led by regulations and protocols. And if you say, okay, what's important in the development of students, then you have to connect with the students. So you have to understand in what kind of an environment are they, and how can I support them in their personal development in a way that it's effective. If it becomes anonymous, it's in big schools and where teachers are just teaching their program, it's becoming anonymous. And I think we should think about how can we create an environment where the development of students or children are number one. And how can we focus on talents instead of all kind of courses where children and students don't like to do? If you're not good at mathematics, for example, why should we push children to do mathematics every day? If you say, okay, we need a certain level of knowledge on these topics, I can agree, but it's what Ken Robinson said. The man died last year, I think, but he had
a famous TED talk on education.
It's beautiful. So we are killing the creativity, the way we make schools. So if you look, I have 3 sons, and I think they're great, but they all had problems at school because they didn't fit in the system. So, but I said, no, the system doesn't fit them. It's the other way around. So if you fit in the system, you become standard. And we have too many standardization, I think. So if you look at schools, if you look at the police force, I was talking to the police academy last week. And then they said, okay, we are creating new education programs for policemen. I said, oh, that's good. So what do you use? And they use all of the things that you learn at an MBA school. And I said, but if you listen to a policeman now, if they're talking, what are they doing in daily practice, and how do they deal with the practical problems they meet in their daily practice? And you make a program out of that. I think it would be much more useful than you learn them how to deal with all the regulations. And of course, you also have to know something about that, but you can learn in your work. So I know a lot of policemen, and I know how frustrated they are to work in a system where, for example, safety is so important, but they said we are not able to prevent people from being safe because we have to do other things and spend so much time on our administration that the safety is getting worse. But if you can connect with the neighborhood, like we are doing with Buurtzorg, I went out for an evening with one of the policemen in our neighborhoods, and he showed me if I can do this in this part of my neighborhood, if I can do this, I'm connected with the restaurants here. If there's something going on, they call me and I feel responsible for. Then you create a kind of collective responsibility for safety.
Right.
So, but it asks for another dynamic. Then he said, this policeman said, Benny is his name. Benny said, I must be, I have to be owner of my role in this neighborhood. And if I'm the owner, then I can go to these different places where I think it's very useful that I can also have a certain active role in keeping the environment safe and healthy. So, and he showed me how it really practical looked like. So, for example, he had a small part of the neighborhood where a lot of young people were making trouble. And there was also in the same place, there was a boxing school. So he said, together with the boss of this boxing school, we made a program. We said, okay, let's try the young people who are making problems on the street, that we invite them for a free boxing lesson. So they got them in the boxing school. And they, of course, they liked it because it was physical, sporting. And then they said, okay, we try when they are in, we also try to learn them something about how you can behave and how you can deal with if you are in this puberty, how you can deal with your aggression. And this, so I thought this was amazing. So it's something that just came out of these two minds of the boss of this boxing school and this policeman. And this is happening all the time, but it's the world around them are an obstacle.
Yeah.
So the boss of this policeman, he has to follow the regulations from The Hague, and there is a lot of push on standardization of activities. And he said, no, I should follow the needs of my neighborhood. So on all this, we wrote pieces on all these different topics from the political party I was participating in, with the idea that we should learn from professionals. So we should give advices. Policemen should give advice on how you organize the police force. Teachers should give advice on how to develop the education system. Lawyers should give advice on how to deal with the legal system. So we had an idea that we should have all kind of expert groups. So they were already participating, and that these expert groups were involved in developing policies on these different topics. So that's not, if you look now, then politicians, I think they said 30%, or perhaps even more, of the politicians in parliament have a background in law. So they don't know anything about healthcare, police force, but they have a background in law. So what you see is that a lot of regulations, a lot of policies are based on risk thinking. So risk thinking is the worst, I think, the biggest enemy for creativity.
Yeah.
So if you build your laws and your regulations on risk thinking, then you're missing a lot of opportunities to develop. So that's my opinion. So it's that if you use this creativity and all these minds of teachers, nurses, doctors, lawyers to create a society which is supporting people. So if you say, what kind of purpose is what kind of worldview do you have? Mine is that society should work in a way that we are supporting each other when it's needed, and to create, on the other side, to create independence. But there should be a balance in these two. So professions should not be led by financial motives, but they should be led by human motives. So,
Yeah.
but I wrote a book about humanity above bureaucracy. So that first, we are all humans, so we should behave like humans, and we should be willing to support each other in a way that's developing society.
Yeah.
That creates new knowledge. So every time again, every generation should have better solutions.
Yeah.
So because we can learn from the past, and if you have an open mind to the future, you can find ways to deal in a better way with the problems of today. So that's this, and I would like to. If I look at my mother, she's 86. She has so much wisdom, but in the system, she's an old woman, which costs money for the state. So we should think about how can we create in neighborhoods, how can we involve everybody? So inclusive neighborhood, inclusive society, where everybody can share their ideas and wisdom. That we see people as people have learned a lot, like in other cultures. The elder people are the wise people. They are asked for advice.
Yeah.
And we want to put them in nursing homes and in all kind of places because we don't. It's a bit ugly to see it all day. So then we put them there, and we put a wall around it, and we say, okay, we lock the door. So my idea is we should make a society more open, human, inclusive, multicultural, learn from different cultures instead of xenophobia. So all the new right parties, I think it's terrible to see. I have I have 3 sons and have 3 daughters-in-law. One is Brazilian, one is Tanzanian, and one is British. So my sons are living in a world of multicultural thinking, and they learn from all these cultures. So they're learning all the time, and they're open to the world. So they have a lot of other perspectives than when you're afraid of something. Fear and risk thinking are 2 very damaging principles.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then the manifestation of it, as you say, is policies, regulations to manage that. Who are good at writing policies and regulate lawyers? So we have a society dominated by lawyers. And yeah.
By lawyers and economic.
Yeah.
So it's financially driven, and I think it should be human driven. So of course, it's good to think about how can we use the economics, and what are the views on money? How can money support society? So, for example, the basic income. I think why shouldn't we give just everybody a basic income? How is it? We had a discussion with the minister who was in the same program I was on Saturday, and then he said, "Oh, I'm so." What did he say? I was so surprised that the amount of homeless people in Holland doubled in 10 years' time. And I think the system as we have it is creating this. So, and he was surprised, as if it's something what's happening just autonomous. No, this is the result of speculations, of big projects where people can earn a lot of money by doing, but the way the price of the houses are rising in the cities. So there are no regulations on that. So everybody is focusing on earning money and creating something for themselves. So if you say no, that we have some collective things, there are some basic problems where we should take care of as a society. We are such a rich country. How is it possible that hundreds of thousands of children are growing up in poverty? and then we say, okay, how can we do something about? But it's part of the worldview we have, I think, and the way we systematically top down organize everything based on these principles of risk avoiding and fear, because we think that people are misusing these systems when we have this quite a big problem in Holland last month, where the government stepped down because they had more than 20,000 families who were accused by the tax authorities for fraud. So, and in most of these cases, there was not any fraud, but it was just profiling, trying to put people under kind of scope. So now everybody is making excuses, from the top of the ministers to the tax authority, everybody. But they did it. It was possible in this system, in Holland, an open system, open society. We say transparent. It's not. So I think if the only reason that I would like to go into politics is to let people see there is another way you can look at things. So there's another way to deal with these topics where everybody profits from.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to show with Buurtzorg. And it's my view on life and my view on humans, people. And it's also something I want to show my children, that there is a lot of things you can do if you follow your own path and your own intuition, and don't let people tell you what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds to me like, in your position as a leader of this, and trust others to do the same.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we're coming up on time, and there were several things I'd have loved to have delved a bit deeper in on the political side, but I know you've got to leave us. So, Jos, thank you so much. We'll put the link to the Buurtzorg website and to the book in the show notes. But thanks again for your time. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard.